one of the points in the MOU between Israel and Lebanon is the military aid to Lebanese government. When it comes to the military aid, we know that Tom Barak in September 2025, he said that if we arm the government in Lebanon, it's going to be all about fighting Hezbollah, not fighting Israel.
Of course. Yes, all the arms that come to go. I mean, Lebanon is not allowed to have air defenses. The West won't allow it. Lebanon is not allowed to have any military capability to defend itself. And that is why the resistance exists. That is why Hezbollah exists. Because Hezbollah is saying that, look, we are willing to disarm if there is a military establishment in Lebanon that has the capability to defend our country. So if the Lebanese government had or was willing or had the political will to create a military force that could protect the country against the Israelis or against ISIS and Al-Qaeda or whoever, then Hezbollah would not be armed. The only reason why Hezbollah is armed is because they know that if they disarm, Israel will take Lebanon. All these proxies of the West, all these NGOs in Lebanon, all these people bound to the Saudis and the Qataris and Turkey and the West and Western embassies, when the Israelis take the country, they will all go to their apartments and their businesses and their mansions in some cases and palaces in some cases in the West. But the country, people will be there'll be millions of refugees. It'll be another Gaza. It'll be another West Bank. The Israelis have no intention. I mean, the Israelis are now openly speaking about the greater Israeli project, which always existed. Back in the day when we would say this sort of thing, they would say this is a conspiracy theory. But now it's out in the open. No one can hide it anymore. So they don't intend to retreat from Lebanon. And these people know it. That's why what the president and the prime minister did in their delegation was that they gifted southern Lebanon to Israel. But Iran won't accept it, and nor will the Lebanese people. They don't have a popular mandate. The majority of the people support the resistance and Hezbollah. And those who don't support them, they're traitors to the country. So the only reason, again, I stress, the only reason why Hezbollah has arms is because there is no real army. The Americans are only creating a militia or an army militia that will kill the resistance, that will kill the Shia and those among the Sunni and Christians and Druze who support the resistance. They want to wipe them out because they know that they're the only force that cares about the Palestinian people, the resistance and its allies. And so this army would be to crush them, to destroy them and finish the resistance. That's why they overthrew Syria. They destroyed Syria and brought in a proxy regime to destroy the resistance. Now they want to destroy it in Lebanon, and then that would make things much easier for the expansionist policies of the Israeli regime. I mean, look, in Syria, you see the Israeli regime has taken huge amounts of territory. Do you think they're going to retreat? No. What is Jolani doing? He's killing some of his rivals in Idlib and in the north with the help of the Americans. He's sending his thugs to kill people alongside the coast again. And in Damascus, instead of protecting the country, instead of taking back territory in the south, they're busy killing people. And of course, the Americans are pleased with him. And he's shutting the border between Syria and Lebanon to make sure no aid is smuggled into Lebanon for the resistance. So that's what this was all about. It was about destroying the resistance against the Israeli regime. And the population, the majority of the Lebanese won't accept this.
Does Iran see any possibility of Israeli attack on Iran? They said that they're trying to do regime change by using their forces, their somehow manipulation of the society in Iran, the way they did before. And I assume that in the aftermath of 12-day war, Iran has removed many of these networks in Iran, which we haven't seen in the latest, round of war. On February 28th, you don't see the way it was on June 2025. It was different. You see the difference between, what has happened because of the intelligence, because of the operation inside Iran, and the way that the intelligence was capable to remove those networks of Israeli spies, Israeli cooperators, and all of that. And they're again talking about that. What is the understanding on the part of Iranians?
Well, right now, these U.S. allies, these terrorist groups in northern Iraq, they're Kurdish separatists. They're trying to stage attacks in Iran. They've murdered 4 people, I think, over the past couple of weeks. And on the border with Pakistan, the Takfiri groups, the Wahhabi, Salafi Takfiris that are based in Pakistan, have carried out a number of attacks. I think 2 people in the last couple of weeks were martyred there. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Right now, yeah. You're back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, what was the last thing I said?
You said about 2 people being martyred at the border with Pakistan.
Yeah, so the Americans are trying to activate the terror groups. And they're also, they smuggled in a lot of weapons into Iran. A lot of them have been confiscated, but there are more weapons. The thing about Iran, Nima, is, and you know this, I'm saying this for the benefit of your audience, of our viewers, is that Iran has borders with 15 countries. It's a very large country. And contrary to what the West says, we have a very lively political landscape. Right now, over the MOU, you're a Persian speaker, you know this very well. There are heated debates going on in Iran, which is a good thing. So the president has his own view, his opponent. I mean, there are those on the fringes. There's been a coup, or there's been, that the unserious people aside, there is a serious debate about the MOU. Some are against it, some are for it. Some say that it has to be, if it's not fully enforced, no more concessions. You have a huge array, you have a huge diverse set of opinions on all issues. And these are heated debates. They are heated debates, which I think is a very good thing. But it's natural for Iran. This is not surprising for us. You know that this is how it's always been. What the Americans and the West and the Israeli regime tried to do is that they tried to infiltrate, and then they bring in and they try to create riots, and then they bring in their militias, their armed militias. The Iranians are going to be much more careful now than before. And as you've seen, and as your viewers have probably seen, the Iranians are striking them in northern Iraq. And the Iranians have a lot of, after this, both the 12-day war, but most importantly, this war, the Iranians are much more confident about their strength. I mean, many believed that Iran would win the war. I certainly did.
Yeah. Seems that you've lost Professor Marandi.
And okay.
Yeah.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You said
yeah.
that.
So I was sorry. So I said basically many people thought that Iran would win, but not everyone did. And outside of Iran, no one did apparently. I mean, most people didn't. So Iranians all have, the collective nation has more confidence in its capabilities now. So they're not fearful of war in the way that, let's say, some were 4 months ago. Some people in Iran thought a war with the United States would lead to defeat. Not everyone, as I said, a segment of you. But that segment has now been convinced of Iran's power. So Iran is more powerful today. It's more prepared. The economy is worse off, but the military is more prepared. So, and the Americans are not in a good position because it will take a very, very long time to make up for the huge shortages that exist in the world today because of the war. And right now, as we speak, those shortages are not being compensated for. The amount of ships leaving the Strait of Hormuz is not nearly enough. So the Iranians are in a strong position to deal with terrorist groups from abroad, terrorist groups in the country. There may be attempts to do things in Tehran during the funeral. They're talking about people not bringing their children to the funeral. They're saying don't bring backpacks. They're saying, they're preparing people just to make sure that these ISIS, Al-Qaeda suicide bombers of Western intelligence agencies and the Israelis don't carry out anything, some mass attack. So they are much more prepared in general now to confront these things than they were months ago.
Yeah, I think the war has been a very different experience for Iranian people. Not only Iranian people, for Iranian military are attached together with IRGC, because Iran, even during the war with Iraq didn't have that much of air power, navy to attack Iran. This was something different for Iran, a new experience. And coming out of this war, somehow putting, I would say it's not in a permanent end, but coming out of this war and having MOU, it means that Iran has learned a lot during the war. And recently we've learned that Iran is improving the air defense system in the southern part of Iran. And what was when you look at the military aspect of what has happened and the way that IRGC or army is talking about, what is their understanding before this war started and right now? How confident they are right now compared to what it was before?
The armed forces collectively are stronger today, much stronger today, I would say, in confronting any new conflict. Not only because they have they've replaced they brought in new missiles and new drones and instead of the old drones and old missiles, and they're upgrading their systems, but also with regards to tactics, with regards to shortcomings that they had to deal with their shortcomings, to improve their tactics, their strategy, and also, as you rightly pointed out, air defenses. They've learned how to develop new techniques to bring down jets, to bring down drones. They've learned from their experience, and that I think is something that the Americans, I'm sure the Americans are taking very seriously. And the Iranians are going to make sure that the United States remains in a vulnerable position economically, so that if it intends to reignite a war, that immediately Iran could bring down their economy. And so unless the Americans take the MOU seriously, then they're not going to get the sort of relief economic relief that they're seeking. The Iranians are not naive. They're not childish. Again, I'm not saying the MOU is a great thing. I'm sort of somewhere in the middle. I think that there are certain things that should have been different in the MOU, and the Iranians should not have agreed until those were met. But I don't think the MOU was a catastrophe unless the Iranians implemented their side of the bargain and the Americans didn't. If the Iranians had opened the Strait of Hormuz and the Americans behaved as they're behaving now, yes, that would have been catastrophic. But the Iranians knew that the Americans were going to lie. They knew that the Americans were going to cheat. They knew that the Americans were going to steal. So that's why in the agreement, the Iranians will continue to be in control of the Strait of Hormuz. Why did they say? They didn't say, the agreement does not say the Strait of Hormuz will be open. That's not what it says. It says that Iran will manage it. Why? Because Iran knew that the United States would lie about Lebanon, that the United States would lie about Iranian assets, that the United States would lie about threatening Iran, that the United States would lie about violating the ceasefire, and that the United States would lie with regards to removing the sanctions, and the United States would quite possibly lie in future about lifting the siege.
I think one of the aspects that is much more important than the military aspect of the war on Iranian people is the psychological sort of change that has somehow transferred the Iranian mindset so far. Because before the war started, they said the United States came out every time, I'm going to bomb you, leave Tehran, and you have to capitulate, do this and that. That was a huge sort of pressure on Iranian society. Many people didn't know, didn't have. People like me, people like new generations, they don't have any sort of understanding of the war psychologically. So the war is coming to the Iranian people, and they see how the war has been managed by the military forces and how capable they are to respond to the American attack and Israeli attack. It was a huge attack, by the way, comparing, to two forces and comparing the aid, the sort of help they got from GCC countries, from Europeans, based on NATO Secretary General. It was huge for Iranian people psychologically. Where they are, where are the Iranian? Let's put it this way. How do you find the Iranian people today when Donald Trump comes out and tries to intimidate Iranians? Because he continues with those tweets. It was based on MOU, but he's just violating that, but continuing, I'm going to bomb you. I'm going to destroy you. This time going to be harder.
Well, let me give you an example. And this is anecdotal, of course, but I think it's reflective of something much bigger. Before the war, when the United States was building up its forces, when I would go on campus, that's where I work, that's my only job, my colleagues would often among themselves and in conversations with me say, will there be war? And of course, many were worried about war, if not everyone. I just came back from campus an hour ago. I was on campus today. No one spoke about war. It was all about, business as usual. Signing papers for the department, at a department meeting, PhD candidates, the next semester, discussing what needs to be done for next semester, the usual. No one said any, and I went again, I was there yesterday too. Sorry, not yesterday, the day before yesterday. No one asked me anything about the war. I didn't see anyone talking about the war. I'm not saying no one does, but the mood 4 or 5 months ago was different from now. That was it was always the center of conversation. Now, there are other things they talk about, but not like, will there be war? Like they would back then. So that fear doesn't exist. I'm not saying it's completely non-existent. They murder people, the Americans and the Israelis and these regimes in the Persian Gulf and the Europeans, all of them collaborated to murder children, to murder our leader, to murder politicians, academics, scientists, to bomb apartment blocks. As I said early once to you, that there were a number of women. Someone who lived on that street said this. There were some women working in a building. They were cooking. They, as volunteers, they decided, and they were all women living in that street. They went into a building. They were cooking for the men who were on the streets and doing it at manning checkpoints. Volunteers who were manning checkpoints and anti-aircraft defenses, and so they were cooking food for them so that they would have more than just the ordinary army or Revolutionary Guard meal, which is probably not all that good. They bombed that building. They bombed those women. They killed all those women who were just cooking for people who were manning checkpoints. These are the monsters that we're dealing with. The United States is a vicious, barbaric regime. The Israelis are vicious and barbaric. They're monsters. Look at what they're doing in Gaza as we speak. Just this morning, last night, they're killing people every day in Gaza. There's a ceasefire. No one in the West cares. No Western journalist says anything about it in the mainstream. You don't see any one of them working at CNN or the BBC tweeting about the slaughtered kids. They're a bunch of cowards and they're agents of empire. They're agents of the Epstein class. So the Iranians know that war is deadly. But the concern that I saw 4 months ago, 4.5 months ago, and during the US buildup when it was getting very serious and they were it was clear that something was possibly going to happen, the conversations today are not at all similar to back then. So I think that the Iranians do not have, many didn't have the fear, but those who did, that fear is non-existent, or comparatively speaking, non-existent. In other words, it doesn't dominate the conversations that I have with people or I see people having among themselves. I'm not saying that it's non-existent, but I'm saying it is substantially different from 4 or 5 months ago.
You mentioned the case of Gaza. That's why Lebanon is important for the Palestinian people. And we know that in the new agreement, in the MOU, Lebanese government, together with the United States jointly, it says jointly commit to financially strangling any group tied to the resistance. And they're basically going after Hezbollah and the acts of resistance in Lebanon. I don't know how capable would the government in Lebanon be to do that. This is not something new for Hezbollah. It's something for such a long time they have tried to do that against Hezbollah. But do you think the new government would have some sort of leverage to do it even more intensely against Hezbollah?
They've been doing it for years. Even the previous governments, they were all in the American camp. But so they may try to do some things. But I've been saying this before, and I very much believe in this. In general, all of this is a good thing because everyone is being exposed. All the masks are being removed. What happened when Syria first fell, and we've gone over this a few times, and I'm sorry if I'm boring your audience, but in Syria, the fall of the previous government, in my opinion, despite all the hardship, despite the fact that it helped the Israelis and the Americans, it was a good thing because many people were deceived by Erdogan, by the Americans, by the Europeans, by Western media, by Al Jazeera, by Al Arabiya, by all the these Arabic despotic regimes that are in the American camp, saying that these are freedom fighters and this is a sectarian war and that this is all about a Shia crescent and all that. And Hezbollah and Iran from the very beginning says nothing to do with that. This is an American attempt to undermine the resistance. And many were deceived. Many were deceived. Now when we see the behavior after the fall of Syria, we knew that Syria would never go after Israel. We knew that they would only go after their own people. We knew that they would only go after the resistance. It was clear as day from day one for us. There's no surprises. But for those who were saying, no, it's the exact opposite, it's become clear. They know, unless someone wants to, willfully close their eyes, as many people do, just like MAGA, or in our region, you have these MAGA people who will oppose the resistance and the Iran and Hezbollah no matter what. They're the MAGA of our region. They'll follow whoever it is that just opposes Iran for whatever reason, and the resistance. So we have our own MAGA in this part of the world. But everyone else is seeing the reality. They're seeing the reality that the government in Lebanon is not representative of Christianity, or the Christians, or the Sunnis, or the Druze, they're representative of the American empire. They're representative of the Israeli regime interests. And the same is true in Syria. And this, I think, is good in the sense that in the long run, it creates greater awareness. So as I say, if someone wants to oppose the Israeli regime, you're either with the resistance or you're not. And if you're not with the resistance, you're not against Israel. Don't pretend to be. You're not. You're just doing something else. You're actually helping Israel. So the divide is clear. It's the axis of resistance, the resistance, and the Israelis. And if those people in the region who want to pretend that there's a third way, there is no third way. Everyone else is in the Israeli camp. Syria, Israeli. Lebanese prime minister, Israeli. Lebanese president, Israeli. They're all in their camp. No one can pretend otherwise. And it's quite interesting that some of these people, they message me. Some of these people who I know, I've known for I don't want to name here, because some of them are known figures. I've known them, some of them, for 20 years. Like they send me messages saying, why doesn't Iran do this? Or why doesn't Iran do that? And I say, why isn't that the Syrian regime that you helped bring to power, that you cooperated with Americans to bring to power, why isn't it doing anything? Why is Trump using it as a stick to threaten the resistance in Lebanon? Why? And they have no answer. But they constantly want to question Iran because they want to hide their own inaction, because they know who they really are and what they've done. And they don't want to admit that, yes, we've created this tragedy. We've helped the Israelis. So they continue to go after Iran. It doesn't matter. They'll continue to go after Hezbollah. Whereas the only hope for the Palestinian people is Iran and Hezbollah and Ansarullah and so on.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Marandi, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
It's always a pleasure, Nima. And thank you very much for having me. And I have to thank your audience for tolerating me.